Okay, so just a quick check-in here. I am getting notices that most people can hear me. So a little yes, I can hear you would be great if you people are able to put that in the chat box. And you can see the chat icon just at the bottom of your screen there. I'm getting some yeses here. Great. And so I think we are going to get started. I'll do a bit of a slow introduction. And just to let people know, we are going to do the presentation in both French and English. Most of the French will be just on the screen, but Helen Jensen, who is here, will do some translation. And I might get Helen to step in now and just repeat some of this basic introduction stuff in French, and then I'll go into more detail about logistics, and we'll get started on the presentation. Helen, are you there? Did I just put you on the spot too quickly?
No, I just forgot to unmute myself. Alors, je recommence. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au séminaire web. On va commencer prochainement. Et puis, si vous pourriez juste indiquer si vous nous entendez dans la fenêtre de chat. Puis, c'est ça, vu qu'on est un programme bilingue, le webinaire va se dérouler dans les deux langues. Pour la plupart, ça va être les diapositives qui vont être bilingues, et mais il y a certaines portions que moi je vais traduire en français aussi.
Thank you, Helen. So yes, just a quick, as we've just said there, we're going to do things in both French and English. You will notice that most of you are on mute, and I'm going to keep folks on mute just because we don't want any interruptions during the presentation. If you do have questions, you can put them into the chat box, as I believe Helen referred to there. That way, especially if it's a French question, Helen or Hugo can help answer that question while the presentation goes on. And I'll just be taking care of logistics in the background. I'm Chris Thoreau from Farm Folk City Folk. And as another quick note, we are recording this webinar as of now, so you will be able to find it online later, and we'll post where that link will be once it's ready to be viewed. Helen?
OK, alors, c'est ça, brièvement, le webinaire va être enregistré, ça va être posté, alors vous pouvez toujours le réviser plus tard. Et puis, si vous avez des questions durant la présentation, vous pouvez les poser dans la fenêtre de chat en français ou en anglais, et puis on va y répondre dans la langue appropriée. Video.
Okay, so I'm going to do some quick introductions here, and then we'll get going. So the bulk of the presentation today is going to come from Alex Lyon, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Sustainable Food Systems at UBC, where she's been since 2016. And Dr. Lyon's research is looking at how and why farmers participate in alternative seed systems and the role of these systems in supporting socially and environmentally sustainable agri-food systems. She started in the world of organic seed while doing her PhD at UW-Madison, working with the Northern Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative, and which was really developing an on-farm research network to breed new varieties for organic agriculture. And her primary work at UBC has been on the BCC trials, which is looking at using participatory variety trials to support the emerging vegetable seed sector in BC and indeed across Canada. So, and now building on this work, Dr. Lyon is working with national partners now to do this work right across Canada. You want to do that in French, Helen, before I introduce you?
Absolutely. Alors, la première présentation, ça va être de la part de Dr. Alex Lyon. Elle fait un postdoc à l'Université de la Colombie Britannique depuis 2016. Et puis, sa recherche regarde vraiment pourquoi et comment les producteurs participent à des systèmes de semences alternatives. Elle a fait son doctorat à l'Université du Wisconsin à Madison, où elle a participé à des essais variétaux North American Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative pour développer des variétés de légumes adaptées à l'agriculture biologique. Et puis, depuis qu'elle est en Colombie-Britannique, elle travaille sur les BCC Trials, c'est-à-dire les essais de variétés en Colombie-Britannique. Et maintenant, ce travail prend de l'expansion dans le projet dont on parle aujourd'hui pour regarder ce genre d'essais, mais à travers le Canada.
Great, thank you, Helen. And Helen herself is an important research partner in this, and not just our translator today. So Helen holds a PhD in biology from McGill University and a Master's of Science from the University of Ottawa in biology. And during her doctoral research, she studied evolution and disease resistance of barley varieties in Morocco, and in collaboration with researchers and agricultural producers in the Tawanate region. Sorry if I'm butchering that. So Helen's been with USC Canada as part of the Bauta family initiative on Canadian seed security since 2013, and she's done work on participatory plant breeding, participatory variety trials, and with a focus on developing varieties adapted to meet the needs of organic and ecological producers.
OK, alors ben là, je me présente moi-même. Je m'appelle Hélène Jensen et moi, je suis votre traductrice aujourd'hui, mais je fais aussi partie du programme de recherche. Moi, j'ai fait un doctorat à l'Université McGill où j'ai étudié, c'était en biologie, j'ai étudié l'évolution de la résistance aux maladies des variétés d'orge au Maroc en collaboration avec des producteurs et des chercheurs au Maroc dans la région de Taounate. Et ça fait depuis 2013 que je travaille pour l'initiative de la famille Bauta sur la sécurité des semences au Canada. Et dans le cadre de ce projet-là, j'ai coordonné le programme au Québec pendant plusieurs années et maintenant, je mets plus l'emphase sur la recherche. Et j'ai fait du travail sur la recherche participative pour le développement de variétés pour le biologique et aussi les réseaux d'essais de variétés.
Thanks again, Helen. And just quickly, I'm Chris Thoreau. I'm the Seed Security Program Director at Farm Folk City Folk. I'm working with both Helen and Alex on this project as well as others, and I will just be staying in the background for this. And after I'm done here, I'm going to pass it over to Alex, and she will start on her presentation.
Okay. Et Chris Thoreau, qui vient de vous adresser, c'est lui qui va s'occuper du webinaire aujourd'hui, mais lui, c'est aussi le gestionnaire du programme de sécurité des semences à Farm Folk City Folk, qui est en Colombie Britannique. Et puis, bien pour aujourd'hui, il va surtout s'occuper du webinaire et répondre aux questions.
Okay. Alex, that's over to you.
All right, thank you both for that introduction, and many thanks to everyone for taking time today to join us. I'm really grateful and excited to be starting this project and introducing it to all of you. So today we're here, I'm here to tell you about the CANOVI project, which stands for Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement. And this project is a collaboration between the UBC Centre for Sustainable Food Systems and the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. And we have funding from the Organic Science Cluster 3 under the Canadian Ministry of Agriculture. So this is a 5-year project that we are launching into, and we're very excited to be doing it. Before I go further, I wanted to stop and see and also give people a chance to practice using their chat box. If everybody could just type in where you're joining us from today, so I can get a sense of our audience.
OK, alors je vais faire une brève traduction. Alors, on est vraiment content de vous avoir avec nous aujourd'hui pour introduire un nouveau projet qui s'appelle ALÉBIO en français, ou Amélioration des légumes biologiques canadiens. C'est un partenariat entre le Center for Sustainable Food Systems à l'Université de la Colombie Britannique et l'initiative Bauta sur la sécurité des semences au Canada. Et puis, c'est un projet qui va avoir lieu sur 5 ans, qui est financé par la grappe scientifique biologique 3. Et juste pour comme se présenter un peu l'un à l'autre, on vous demande juste de mettre dans la fenêtre chat d'où vous venez aujourd'hui, d'où que vous nous rejoignez aujourd'hui.
Okay, fantastic. And we're getting a bunch of responses in here, and we're from all across Canada, which is really exciting. I see several BC participants, Alberta, Quebec, Ontario, someone from Seattle, Washington. I think I know who that is, Rachel. So some friends, some new folks I haven't met before. So that's great. And again, I'm really, really grateful for you all for taking the time to be here today. Oh, someone tuning in from the 99 bus line in Vancouver. So thanks again. So my goals for you today, by the end of this presentation, are that you'll have a general understanding of what CANOVI is and what we're trying to do. And then second, that if you are thinking about participating in any of the variety trials or other activities, that you'll have a general sense of what to expect. And finally, that you'll know where to go for questions and more information at the end. Helen, are you going to translate again, or should I just launch into it at this point?
Maybe I'll just translate that last thing you said, and then just you can launch into it.
Sure.
Alors, notre but pour aujourd'hui, c'est en premier que vous compreniez un peu c'est quoi le projet ALÉBIO, que si vous êtes intéressé à participer, vous avez une idée de à quoi vous attendre, et puis vous sachez aussi où vous adresser si vous avez d'autres questions après le webinaire. Over to you, Alex.
Okay, thank you. Let me go forward with my slides. Okay. So general overview for the presentation today. First, I'm going to talk about the goals and background of the CANOVI project. And then we'll talk about the variety trials that we're going to be doing this year in 2019. Then we'll talk about some of the participatory plant breeding that's happening in the project and what that means, participatory plant breeding. And then Emma Wenfeld, who is a master's student at University of Toronto, will be talking about another really exciting part of this research, which is looking at using functional traits to understand plant-environment interactions. And then finally, we'll talk about communication and how to get information about the project and events we'll be having. And I'm going to stop for questions a few times through this. So we'll stop for questions after we talk about variety trials, and again after the plant breeding part, and then again at the end. So don't hesitate to type questions into the chat box as I'm going, or indeed just to type into the chat box to tell me to talk slower. Excuse me, there's a bit of a lag. Okay. So the CANOVI project, again, Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement, as Chris mentioned, it builds on a project that we've been doing for the last few years of variety trials in BC under the BC Seed Trials program. And it also builds on collaborative variety trials and plant breeding that the Bauta family initiative has been doing for several years. So we've come together and been able to combine all of our strengths to introduce this new program. So our first goal is to expand the on-farm variety trial network that we've already begun to develop and to continue to support that in doing variety trials. The second objective is to support participatory plant breeding for Canadian organic vegetable farms. And we'll be getting into more details on both of those aspects shortly. And then because we have a network of variety trials going on, we are able to use this opportunity to ask some more general and sort of basic science questions about how plants respond to their environment and how varieties are adapted to different conditions. And that's what Emma will be explaining. So a brief introduction to our team. We have quite a few people as part of the project, and I wasn't able to find a picture of all of us together. That's a goal I have, is for all of us to be in the same place and take a picture together. But the main project partners on CANOVI are the UBC Farms Center for Sustainable Food Systems and the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. And just to give you a sense of who that is, really. So Helen is here. Helen and myself and Chris Thoreau there in the middle looking at some carrots. And then we also have Professor Miney Isaac at the University of Toronto, is a really important partner in this project doing the functional trait research. And her graduate student Emma will be talking to us today. And then we have the Bauta Initiative. I kind of think of them as a family. They are the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security with Abir Day there as the director. And then there are regional coordinators for the Bauta Initiative in 5 regions across Canada. And they're not all in this picture, but they are Stephanie Hughes in Atlantic Canada, Hugo Martorell in Quebec, Rebecca Ivanoff in Ontario, Iris Vaisman in the Prairies, and Chris Thoreau in BC. And the way this works is they all work through local regional organizations to network with farmers and provide support for research and variety trials in their regions. So that's the general picture of who we are. So the goals of the variety trials that we're doing with the CANOVI project, and actually I want to back up and just think about reasons for doing variety trials in general on farms. Farmers do variety trials to understand how varieties perform on their farms. So from a plant breeder's perspective, we think of that as the target environment, the place where the varieties will be used. So we could be looking at how they respond to different regional climates, different soils, and different cropping systems like organic agriculture. Variety trials are also done, especially by farmers, to figure out the best variety for specific market needs. So flavor is often something that's looked at in a variety trial, the appearance of the variety, how well it stores, kind of production qualities that are important to farmers. Many farmers that I talk to are often trialing 1 or 2 varieties extra on their farm to have something available to them as a replacement in case one of the varieties that they depend on becomes unavailable through seed catalogs. I think this is a somewhat regular experience, particularly for organic farmers, that a variety that's really important may not be selling widely, and so seed companies will stop producing it, and farmers want to have something else to grow that is comparable. Finally, variety trials are a really important part of the plant breeding process. So variety trials can be done at the beginning of plant breeding to look for parent lines that are going to be good material, good starting material for plant breeding. And they're also really important at the end of a plant breeding process to evaluate how the new variety performs and see if it's really finished yet. So now I have another question for people to type in, is whether you have done any variety trials either on your own or with the BCC trials or the Bauta initiative. So maybe Helen, if you want to translate that question.
Alors, on aurait une autre question, si vous pouvez mettre la réponse dans la fenêtre de chat. C'est juste pour savoir si vous avez déjà fait des essais de variété, soit comme juste pour vous-même à votre ferme ou avec des regroupements, que ce soit BCC Trials ou l'initiative Bauta ou d'autres réseaux.
Great, lots of yeses. A few people who have not participated in our trials but have done trials on their own. Or have done it with our project and on their own. So that's great. And whether you are totally new to variety trials or have been doing them for a while, I hope you'll be able to learn something today. Okay. So as Chris mentioned, my involvement in this started out with variety trials just in BC for the BCC trials, but there were already many variety trials going on through the Bauta initiative, and we were able to kind of combine those networks. So this is a map of where our carrot trials were last year. So you can see we're fairly spread out, and we hope to grow this network even more through the CANOVI project. Excuse me, there's a bit of a lag when I try to change slides. Okay. And the way that we organize these trials, we have many on-farm trials, and because we have such a large network of trials, it gives us a lot of information to compare. So we have, rather than having to rely on one farm, we have many different farmers giving feedback on variety performance, which gives a better overall sense of the variety. And then as another part of that, we have hub sites at the UBC farm and at Everdale Farm in Ontario, where we're growing larger trials. So here's Rebecca Ivanoff managing the hub site carrot trial last year. And here are some of the students, including Chris, that work with me at the UBC farm. He's doing a master's degree as well as all the other work he does. So he's both a student and a coordinator in this picture. But they're also harvesting the carrot trial and weighing them. So Our hub sites give us a bit more detailed information where we're able to control the trial a bit more and spend more time doing things like weighing and measuring. Whereas the on-farm trials, we try to keep smaller anyway, and simpler in order for farmers to be able to manage them. So with on-farm trials, farmers are generally growing 1 to 2 plots of each variety, whereas at the hub sites, we're growing 3 plots in a randomized replicated design. And our crops that we're trialing this year are carrots and peppers. And the crop choices are based on a few things. We have done a plant breeding survey of priorities for organic farmers for plant breeding across Canada. And these were crops that were very highly prioritized in that survey. There are also crops where we are able to bring in collaborators for plant breeding. And that's been a big benefit to this project. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but that's sort of how we ended up with carrots and peppers. And with carrots, based on the feedback we've been getting from farmers, we have 2 market classes that you can choose to trial this year. So we have orange storage carrots, which was the same as our variety trial last year. And most of those are a type called nonce. So it's a carrot with a rounded tip that's better for storage. And then also, because there was some interest in other colors of carrots, we are doing a trial of red carrots. So we have several open pollinated and hybrid red carrot varieties that you can grow and test out. And then in peppers, the growers in Quebec who have been in Ontario, who have been doing participatory plant breeding have been really interested in developing a pepper that is earlier maturing for the north, and in a blocky red bell pepper. So we have bell pepper trials of existing varieties, and we have also a variety trial of corno peppers. So there's this like elongated shape of pepper is called corno di toro. It's also called a shepherd pepper or a frying pepper. So you can choose either of those trials or do both. And I think everyone who signed up for pepper trials is receiving their seed hopefully today or very soon. But there's still time to sign up for the carrot trials. So if you're interested in those, please do get in touch with us and let us know. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of what to expect when you sign up for a variety trial with CANOVI. The first step is to contact one of the regional coordinators that I mentioned earlier, and we'll be giving their contact information at the end, and talk to them about what you would like to grow. With each of these trials, there are a number of varieties that are the core set that we would ask every grower to plant in their trial, and then there are some additional optional varieties. And you also have the option of choosing your own varieties to add to your trial on your farm if you can source seed of it yourself. So there's a lot of options, and you can talk to your regional coordinator about what would work for you and how much space and time you have for it. Then after you've signed up, we'll be sending you the seeds of the amounts that you'll need to plant the trial. And we'll be sending you instructions either in the mail or by email. And the instructions will also be available on our website for you to download whenever you need them, so you don't have to keep track of an email or a piece of paper. If you're growing peppers, of course, you're going to be starting them in the greenhouse. If you're planting carrots, you're going to be seeding them directly. Either way, there will be guidelines in the instructions for you to plant the plots in a random order in your field. And there are minimum amounts of each crop to grow in a plot. But some of the way that you design the trial is flexible to the space and the layout that you have. So then you grow the trial just according to how you would normally grow that crop. We give some guidelines about spacing so that there's some amount of uniformity, but really you can adjust them to fit into your system. And then, however you would normally do weed control and watering and fertility, we would just ask you to do the same for the variety trial. with both of these crops, we'll be doing an early evaluation. So you'll probably be keeping track of how vigorous they are when they first start, looking at them once then, and then looking at them once again at harvest to the rest of the evaluations. And this year we're using a platform that's new. A few people, well, we've been looking at it a bit last year, but it's really new to the project this year, called SeedLinked. And it's a platform specifically for participatory variety trials that's being developed by some researchers and programmers at the University of Wisconsin. And we're helping them test it out, and we are really interested in your feedback about it. So when you go out to evaluate your variety, you'll be giving the, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll go into the SeedLinked platform in a little bit. First, I want to get into a bit more about setting up your trial. So you can see crop instructions online, and we'll be sending them to you. For peppers, we're asking you to plant 12 plants per plot, and with carrots, 12 row feet per plot. So you could double it up, so have, if you do 2 rows in a bed, you would have 6 feet of each variety. And then you can decide whether you have space for 1 replication or 2 replications on your farm. So 1 replication would be just 1 plot of each variety, and 2 replications would be 2 plots, and you would plant them in a design I'm going to go into in a minute. Then, as I mentioned, you can choose if you want to do the optional varieties or add any additional varieties. And then in the past, we have sent out the varieties with code names so that you're not actually seeing the variety name. So in this picture, for example, instead of saying whatever beet this was, it's just BG04, which can help you be less biased when you're giving the variety a rating. However, this year you have a choice of either planting it with the variety name or doing a blind trial by using the code names. We'll provide you with both, and you can decide how you label them in the field. So to give you a bit more, I see there's some questions coming up in the chat, and some comments there, and I'll get to questions in a moment. But to give you a bit more detail on the 1 replication versus 2 replications and how to plant the varieties. So here's an example. At the top, if you were to plant 2 replications of the variety, this top row would be 1 replication, and the bottom row would be the 2nd replication. And in each of these rows, you would have a different random order. And you can make a random order yourself by drawing the names out of a hat or just randomly choosing how you plant them. So that's a 2 replication trial. And then the best practice with a variety trial would be to plant it surrounded by more of the same crop so that it's not being affected by being on the edge of a row. So if these are your carrots, hopefully you'd have more carrots in these buffer rows all around them. Another thing you might be wondering here is the check variety. A check variety is a standard variety that we're familiar with the performance. It's usually something that many farmers grow. And it gives us a way to compare the other varieties to kind of a known quantity, something that we're sure of already. And also gives us a better sense of how to compare farms to each other. If we can see that the check variety is doing better on one farm than another, that gives us a sense of generally how that farm is doing. So in your 2-row trial, those check varieties would be just mixed in. If these 2 replications is a bit too much, you have the option of doing 1 replication. And then here you would just do 1 row, randomly plant the varieties, and then plant 2 plots of the check variety towards the edges of the trial. So this way, if you have some variation going on, you can kind of see from the different performance of the check plots. So let me just see if I'm at the end here. Yeah, so I can answer a couple questions about this right here. So one question is the green row is 12 feet or is each green box 12 feet? So this really depends on the crop. I tried to make this a general drawing so that it would fit any plot. So if this were the peppers, then each of these would be 12 plants at whatever spacing you're using for the 12 plants. If it's carrots, then this would be 12 row feet. However, like I said, with either one, you could decide to plant 2 rows per bed. So then each of these would just be 6 feet, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Jeremy just answered the question. If you plant 1 row, that those are each 12 feet. If you're planting 2 rows per bed, then those are each 6 feet in our case with both of the plots, with both of the crops we're doing. Thanks for that question. Okay, so excuse me. So SeedLinked is a platform that we're using this year, and we will provide options to use paper as well. But it's a web platform for entering your variety ratings. And right now, the developers are creating a version for your phone as well, so you can enter it on your smartphone, or you can take your ratings in the field on paper and come in and enter it on your computer. So this is just an example. This is not exactly what it will look like in our case, but it gives you a sense of you've got your crop, and then for each variety, you're giving it a rating. In our case, you'd be giving it a 1 to 5 star rating for each variety based on different traits. So not that different from what we've done in the past with if you've done VCC trials before, but this is just kind of doing it online, and that'll help us in a number of ways. And then one of the new features or kind of advantage of SeedLinked is once you've done that, you can actually go on immediately and see other farmers' ratings. So you can look at a map across Canada and across the US, anywhere where people are using SeedLinked, and you can see what ratings they gave to the same varieties. And you can search by variety and see how farmers rated them on different traits. So we hope that this will be something useful to the trials, and that we'll be able to get you faster results. One of the things that slows us down in the BCC trials is getting everybody's ratings on paper and then having time to enter that all into spreadsheets and do the analysis and get results back to you. So this makes that happen much faster. And then, like I said, we've definitely gotten feedback that not everyone wants to bring their smartphone into the field with them. So we'll be providing paper forms that you can use and then enter it yourself. And we also will be providing further trainings in SeedLinked. The developer of SeedLinked will be doing webinars in both French and English. So keep your eyes peeled for that when we announce the dates. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to stop and take any questions you have about variety trials, or if anybody needs a bit more explanation in French, please ask for that as well.
On fait une petite pause pour quelques questions pour clarification en anglais ou en français.
Oh, great. So Chris just shared the URL to look at SeedLinked if you'd like to go on to the website and read about it yourself. There's a lot of great information there already. And then there's a question here, will SeedLinked allow us to still review our own results after the recordings or ratings? Yes, absolutely. And you can even go on there and change them if you change your mind about something. Okay, so there's a question here. Last year, I planted 2 checks per each replication. Is this needed? No. So if you're doing multiple replications, like 2 or 3 replications, then there only needs to be 1 plot of the check variety in each replication. So sorry about any confusion about that last year. It's only if you're doing just 1 replication that then we ask you to plant 2 checks, two plots of the check variety, and that's kind of to compensate for the fact that you're only doing one replication. Yeah. Again, the danger, I guess, with 1 replication is that if you have some sort of drier spot in your field or any sort of variation in your field, if you just have 1 plot of the variety and it's planted in a strange spot, you're not going to know whether it's performing better or worse because of its genetics or because there's something strange going on there. So if you just have 1 replication, having 2 plots of the check variety gives you sort of a sense of, wow, I've got a lot of variation in my field, or no, things are pretty uniform, so I can trust that what I'm seeing here is based on variety performance. Okay, unless there's any last questions here, I will move on. And if you have more questions about the variety trials, please do ask them at the end. So now I want to talk about participatory plant breeding. So the goal of participatory plant breeding is to develop new varieties as a collaboration between plant breeders and farmers. So it's a way of bringing farmers' knowledge back into plant breeding. And I say back into plant breeding because farmers have always been plant breeders, and so much of the diversity in our crops that we have today is because of farmers essentially doing plant breeding, selecting their varieties and introducing diversity. But participatory plant breeding sort of pairs the knowledge that farmers have with the knowledge that formally trained university plant breeders have. And participatory plant breeding has been used for a lot of different objectives. It's particularly good for meeting needs that are not being addressed by the mainstream seed industry or plant breeding industry. So for example, the needs of small-scale farmers, farmers in environments that are maybe a bit more challenging for that crop. It's really useful for developing varieties that perform well outside of major areas of production. So for example, with carrots, many of the new carrot varieties that are being developed by the seed industry are focused on places where they're growing hundreds of acres of carrots or more. So a lot of the varieties are introduced for the Central Valley of California, whereas, you know, even BC, where we do grow quite a few carrots, is not as big of a region of production. And certainly when we look across Canada, it's not as big of a region of production, even though carrots are still important to us. So that's a place where you might not be getting the best breeding for your area, and having a participatory plant breeding program can help. Participatory plant breeding has also is increasingly being used to breed varieties for organic farms. And one of the advantages of that is that organic farms are complex, and they involve a lot of the knowledge of the farmer. The farmer's expertise is very important in understanding what an organic system is like and how to breed for it. So participatory plant breeding has been used a lot there. And farmers can participate in plant breeding in many different steps of the process. So for example, with our workshops that we've done and interviews and our plant breeding survey, we're trying to incorporate farmers' participation in setting the breeding objectives, so deciding what's important. That's sort of where we're at in our project right now. Then farmers can also be involved in choosing parent lines, which is the first step of a breeding process. So selecting the original material that's going to be crossed to create a new population. Farmers can be involved in making those crosses. That's maybe the most, can be a tedious part of it, but farmers can do it. Farmers can then be involved in guiding the selection process. So after that cross is made and you have a new experimental population with a lot of variation, this is a really effective way for farmers to be involved, is to go through the field with the plant breeder and decide which of those are the best to move forward in the plant breeding process. And then farmers can be involved in testing varieties that are in the later stages of breeding and providing feedback about what still needs to happen. An important part that we'll be looking at and figuring out towards the later stages of this project is producing seed for variety release. So once a new variety has been developed, how do we get enough seed of that to get out to everyone so they can use it? So there's really an important role for seed growers at that stage. So the plant breeding projects that we have in CANOVI involve pepper, carrot, and squash. And pepper is the one that's been going on for the longest already. So here we're really just supporting an ongoing project that is a collaboration between farmers in Ontario and Professor Michael Mazurek at Cornell University. And he is a plant breeder who focuses on organic agriculture. And he provided some of the initial seed to the Ontario growers from his plant breeding program. So he made some crosses and gave them some seed with diverse genetics that they could start selecting from in order to develop an early maturing blocky red pepper. So that's one of the projects that we're supporting, and I think the best way to learn more about it and figure out how to get involved is just to stay in contact with us, let us know that you're interested in it, and as seed becomes available from that, then we'll be sharing more information about how more people can get involved. The next project that we are now starting is carrot breeding. And in this project, we're collaborating with Organic Seed Alliance, which is a nonprofit in Washington State, and specifically with Dr. Phil Simon, who is a carrot breeder at the University of Wisconsin. And so he's another public plant breeder in the US. And he also has been doing a project of carrot breeding for organic agriculture with the Organic Seed Alliance. So they have carrot material that they've been working on for several years. And when we developed this collaboration with them, they sent us seeds of seven carrot populations that they had developed that they thought would be a good fit for our breeding priorities of a storage carrot with disease resistance, resistance to various diseases that are important in our area, and all of the flavor and vigor traits that are important to organic growers. So last year, we grew out the seeds of those experimental populations. We selected 3 experimental lines and an existing variety called Rimba. And right now in the UBC greenhouse, we are making what's called a strain cross, so a cross between different diverse populations. So here are the carrot plants being grown out in a mesh enclosure, and we're putting flies in there, and they're getting cross-pollinated. So we will see, it's sort of yet to be determined what kind of a seed set we get and how successful the cross is. But the plan then, once we have a successful cross and enough seed of it, is to share that with a few farmers who will then participate in making selections on their farms of this new carrot population. There's the carrot lines being grown out at our farm, and Dr. Phil Simon, and here's Michaela Coley and Lori McKenzie at Organic Seed Alliance, who are collaborators on this project. Finally, the squash project is just getting started, and just sort of in development of figuring out what we want and what the steps will be, but that will be another collaboration with Michael Mazurik at Cornell, where he will make some crosses and provide them to us to share with farmers to be doing selections on their farms. So now, before we go into Emma's part of the presentation, I just want to stop again for questions and any translation that might be good to happen.
On fait une autre petite pause pour des questions, puis traduction au besoin.
Awesome. It says Rachel, who's online here, made those crosses and supported the work of the pepper crosses, I believe. Yeah, that's fantastic. One of the graduate student was a graduate student at the time in Michael Mazurik's program. Someone else says Nash's Rimba is a carrot I've saved seed from. Yeah, Rimba is a very good variety especially for the Pacific Northwest. That is why we chose it as a parent line, and hopefully with the other material we're crossing with it, we'll bring new disease resistance and color, actually. And then another question is, squash project is yet to come. Helen, do you want to speak to the squash project for just a minute?
Yes, sure. So the squash project, I'd encourage you to talk to your regional coordinator about it, but we should have crosses for squash this year. Right now they're in the greenhouse, and so we'll know in a few weeks like how well the crosses did and how much seed we have of them. But we have a cross of 2 delicata parents, Candy Stick and Zeppelin, which is kind of a cross between a more high-performing delicata and a more flavor-filled delicata that someone could select out of. And we also have a few different crosses of different acorn parents. You can see them on the slide here. So actually, if someone was interested in doing some selection on squash this year, they could. Right now we have I think one grower who's interested in the delicata cross, but she's going to start this year with just doing a variety trial of the parents to really get a good feeling of if she wants to work with that cross or not. So anyone who's interested in squash, please be in touch and talk about what you're looking for. And we can really try to help shape that program based on the needs that people express.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, again, we can do more questions at the end, but I don't see any other questions coming up. Oh, here we go. Wondering if there's a real difference between honey oat and candy stick. Maybe honey bear.
Yeah, well, honey bear is an acorn and candy stick is a delicata. Honey boat.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that variety.
I don't really know honey boat either. I think, like, the story of candy stick is that it's kind of a selection from an OP that at one point there was kind of an accidental crossing and the candy sticks, or maybe it was honey boat, became kind of bitter. And candy stick was like an older variety that was kind of like a rescue of that gene pool.
There's a few answers here. This is Rachel Holtigren, I believe, right? Is saying they have similar parentage and perhaps they both came out of the OSU, Oregon State University program. Jeremy says honey boat looks shorter. They have sort of a different appearance. So, yeah. Okay, well, at this point, Chris, do you want to introduce Emma?
Yeah, so Emma here is going to talk about her research she's doing on functional traits related to carrots. And Emma is completing her Master's of Science in Physical Geography at the University of Toronto and working with Dr. Marnie Isaac, who Alex introduced earlier. And her research in agroecology focuses on regionally adapted seeds. Before this research, Emma had spent a couple of years working in Uganda and South Africa, where her research involved working with farmers to integrate local and indigenous knowledge into crop modeling and climate change vulnerability. So I will pass it on to Emma here to talk about how she's engaged in the carrot research in this project.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, hi, everybody. So today I'm just going to be going over a bit about my research and I'll talk about what functional traits are and what they can tell us about the varieties that we're trialing, and then finish with a little bit about this year's sample collection, which Alex has gone over. So the goal of my research is to determine whether regionally adapted varieties perform well beyond yield alone. And to do this, I measure the functional traits of regionally adapted and broadly adapted carrot varieties to compare their performance. And by performance here, we're referring to how each variety grows and interacts with and responds to the various processes on your farm, above ground and below ground. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag on the PowerPoint here. There we go. So you've noticed how crops of the same variety grow differently depending on the environment. So this little schematic along the top here just shows hypothetically the same variety of carrot grown across an environmental gradient. So it would show how one carrot variety grown across different environments could respond to conditions ranging from optimal to suboptimal. So for example, with higher or lower soil nutrients, more or less soil moisture, increased or decreased rainfall, changes in the level of light. So plants respond to this by exhibiting resource acquiring traits or resource conserving traits. And we can measure this response using crop height or number of leaves. But these are agronomic traits that focus on yield. And these agronomic traits, the research, it's not hypothesized to cumulatively help us understand how the whole agro ecosystem functions. And so we're interested in looking at how your plants respond beyond yield alone. So that's where functional traits come in. So another way to assess the response of crops is to measure the size, the thickness, the weight, the chemistry of leaves and roots. So unlike agronomic traits, the functional traits, they're physiological, anatomical, and chemical characteristics of the plants. and they underpin aspects of the agroecological structure and function. So studying these functional traits beyond yield, it can help inform our more mechanistic understanding of a plant's response to environmental conditions. So it's a good way to know how well a given variety is doing in a certain type of soil, under certain management conditions, in a given climatic region. So when we collect, just shows collecting leaf traits, looking at root traits, looking at reproductive traits, and then whole plant traits. And so when we look at the changes in leaf and root size, shape, chemistry of a crop grown across very different environmental conditions, for example, across Canada, from east to west, it helps us predict the best conditions for the best growth. As these changes in the leaves and roots, they're great indicators of plant performance. So why is it important to study the functional traits beyond yield? So it shows the various scales. So the literature shows us that this functional trait-based research can help us understand and predict the effects of changing diversity and varieties in agroecosystems, ranging from the individual plant level, the genetic level, right up to global scales. So it'll tell us things such as improving our understanding of agricultural vulnerability modeling, understanding the contributions of farms to global net primary productivity, to biogeochemical cycling, looking at non-crop biodiversity maintenance, the microbial interactions on your farm, and then right down to the plant level, looking at nutrient acquisition strategies, looking at adaptation strategies in the face of climate change, looking at improvements in terms of crop breeding and productivity. French is showing up first. So what do we already know about functional traits? So not a whole lot. This shows the tried plant database. And so that's essentially the world's largest database of functional traits, which compiles the data that we have on functional traits for thousands of species. However, it only has information on 8 crops, which I've shown pictures of here, including beets, corn, cassava, because this database mainly focuses on plant species and natural systems, not crops. So you can see there's a big gap in information when it comes to agricultural commodities. So specifically, what we don't know is how field crops express functional traits across climatic regions. So across Canada is what my research will look at. How field crops express these functional traits across varieties. So within a carrot, the different varieties. And then we know almost nothing about carrots and functional traits as well. And so what do these traits mean for yield and the health of your farm? So variation in these functional traits, it helps us identify key plant-soil interactions. And variation also helps us identify whether regionally adapted seeds are performing well beyond yield alone. So I'll just quickly go over what we've already done. So I noticed a lot of you have participated in last year's carrot trials. So these pictures will be familiar to you. Earlier, Alex showed the map showing the farmer participants in the whole project. This map here just shows the 10 farms across BC and Eastern Canada who participated in the 2018 carrot trialing. The participants mailed in samples to our lab in Scarborough. Here are the samples that they mailed in. And then here is Kira, who works in our lab doing some analysis last August. And so we have that those preliminary samples have taught us a lot moving forward. For instance, this graph just shows the optimal number of farms to sample from. And so you can see where essentially where the line levels off there between 4 and 5 farms is the optimal number of farms to do these trials at in each region. The data also tells us that interactions between the farm locations and the different varieties of carrot, those interactions might account for significant differences in the functional traits that we measured, which is really exciting. It means this research, it could be super important. So it's really exciting moving forward. So this is last slide, just looking at the trials this summer moving forward. So along the side here are the 6 core varieties of carrots that Alex mentioned earlier. So these are 6 nonce varieties, including some regionally adapted to the eastern locations, some to the western locations, and then some Czech varieties broadly adapted. And so my research, I'll want to collect 9 carrots per variety, and then 6 varieties will be grown on each farm. So that would be 54 carrot varieties per farm. I'll be collecting, pairing that with soil samples, which is just a couple of tablespoons per sample. It'll help us determine fertility and then also the microbial diversity and sort of function associated with each variety of carrot on your farm. And then also we'll be collecting entire carrot samples this year as opposed to just the leaves, which we collected last year. And this helps us link our data to yield as well, which is obviously a super important trait to look at. And the sample collection will happen in July and August of this year for those of you participating. Last year, the collection was in mid-August, and I'll be getting in touch with those of you who are interested in these carrot trials separately by email. And then another component of this research is interviews, because I'm interested in understanding how your insights into varieties and access to seeds. So a quick interview on that day in July and August when I come to collect carrot samples. I'd be really grateful for that. And then finally, some data analysis after all the samples are collected. Some of the things that I'll be looking for in the analysis are soil fertility, plant nutrition, plant stress response, and functional traits that these 6 varieties have exhibited across Canada. So that's it from me. If anyone has any questions or comments or feedback right away, I would love to hear any of it.
So we are used to these moments of silence during webinars, so you can continue to put questions in. And I do see we have our first one from Rebecca there. Mailing and samples this year. Do you want to discuss that, Emma?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can speak to the 6 core varieties that I'm talking about do not need to be mailed in. I will be coming physically in person to the 10 farms or so on which my sort of subsection of these trials is, and I'll be doing collection that way. But I can't speak to the larger project. Perhaps Alex or Chris could speak to that.
Yeah, we don't have anybody mailing in samples for anything else. So that was the only samples that were being mailed in were for the functional trait research. So
we're for this?
No.
Okay, excellent. Then yeah, no mailing this year at all. Oh, thank you. I'm excited to meet all of you as well in person, coming to the farms.
Yeah, we're really happy that this that this network is able to support this research as well. So we're happy to have Emma and Marnie on the project. I have a couple more slides here of contact information, and we can do more questions if it makes sense to switch back over to me now. I'm going to stop sharing the screen with you, Emma.
Yeah, back over to you, Alex. Thanks so much. I think you stopped sharing it with everyone there.
Did I really?
You've disappeared on this end, yeah.
Sorry. Are we back?
So we've got you back. It's there you go. Perfect.
Yep.
Nice one.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. All right. So now I just want to talk a bit about the events that we'll be having this year and going forward, and how to get in touch with us. So one of my favorite features, actually, of the CANOVI program and the BCC Trials program is doing events and field days where we're able to add to the value for farmers, I think, by bringing in people and having trainings, and also getting together to look at variety trial results together. So this is a field day we had at UBC Farm last year, all looking at our leek trials. So the best ways to get involved with the variety trials, or to get involved with this project this year, is either to grow a variety trial or let us know that you're interested in on-farm plant breeding, in which case we'll sort of be in touch when there's an opportunity. That's sort of limited by the amount of seed that we have. There are fewer farms we can support, but we'll be in touch with you when there's an opportunity. For the workshops that we'll be having, like I mentioned, we'll be having 2 more webinars, one in French and one in English, about seed linked. We're hoping to have those in about a month or so that you can have a chance to understand it better before the season starts. We also, the next 2, the dates haven't been set at all yet, but at some point this year, we will be having a workshop on seed disease management, so specifically around disease management for seed production in carrots and peppers, which is obviously important for our project since we may be sharing seed between farms. We want to make sure we have best management practices in place to prevent spreading diseases with our seed. And then we will also be having Michaela Coley and Lori McKenzie come up to do a workshop on participatory plant breeding. And so those are just a few of the things that we have committed to doing this year, and we'll also be having other on-farm events and opportunities for you to look at the variety trials. So again, stay tuned and kind of make sure that you're watching our feed or getting on our newsletter to or in touch with your regional coordinator to get notifications about those events. And then in the future, there'll be opportunities for helping test any new varieties that we develop through participatory plant breeding. So that's another way that you can get involved. And also, if you're a seed grower, I think at some point we will have a need for increasing some of the seed that we've developed. So those are all ways to get involved. For general information and to see results from this project, actually, the bottom 2 websites, so the Center for Sustainable Food Systems website and the Bauta Initiative website are ways to get general information about the project. And then the BC Seed Trials website has results from all the BC Seed Trials research, and this specific crop instructions link will be posting all of the up-to-date crop instructions for this year. I don't expect everybody to grab this right while I'm talking, but if you, I'm just putting up everybody's contact information so you can refer back to it. So here you can see all the regional coordinators and who to get in touch with based on where you are. You can also get in touch with me and with Helen Jensen for any questions about this project. So with that, I want to, again, thank all of our collaborators, the Bauta Initiative and Farm Folk City Folk for contributing to this project and helping with all of both the logistics and the funding, and then to our funders from Investment Agriculture Foundation and the BC Ministry of Agriculture and Organic Science Cluster 3 and the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And thanks to all of you for joining. So now we can do one more round of questions if there are more.
So I'll answer Rebecca's question quickly. Yeah, so this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted in many spots. So it'll be posted on the BCC Trials website with the crop instructions. We'll share it with this group of people via email. So if you've registered for the this webinar through Eventbrite, it'll get shared with you there, and then we'll post on social media as well. So it'll go into multiple places, but will for now live on the BCC Trials crop instructions page.
And again, that's bcctrials.ca.
So maybe just Craig's question there. So yes, if you are interested in participating in the trials, do get in touch with the regional coordinator for your area. The list was, Alex, you want to throw that up again? Yeah. And it's easy enough to get a hold of everybody there. Yeah, and they can answer more questions as well in terms of what some of the details look like. A little more detail than we were able to cover here today, but they can answer most of your questions. There is a question here from Hugo about manual pollination, which is not...
I'm having a hard time seeing the chat window, so maybe you can read it out.
Okay, yeah, so just a question about, and maybe you can elaborate there, Hugo, just about manual pollination, even though I don't think anything we are doing is requiring any manual pollination. So if you can elaborate on that a little bit, Hugo.
Maybe I'll jump in here. So Hugo's follow-up is that squash may require manual pollination. That's if you're doing the participatory plant breeding for squash, in the case where you can't isolate them from other squashes, because squash is an outcrossing species. I would say in that case, we'll have more specific protocols for the squash growers, and it's something we'd talk over with them. Squash is a crop that would require, in that case, more work and more time commitment from people, and that's something that would be discussed more in detail at that time.
Thanks, Helen. So we are at 10 after 11. I imagine, I see we have lost a few folks that have dropped off. Not seeing a lot of questions tells us that I think Alex, Helen, and Emma did a great job of answering questions throughout the presentation. And as we know, you can reach folks at the emails above. We can still take some more. Question here from Brian: for F1 varieties, how would one go about cultivating that variety for their environment? It might be a little beyond the scope of what we're going into here, but Helen or Alex, do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're referring to sort of doing continuous improvement and selection on a variety on your farm, that's not something you would generally be able to do with a hybrid variety, because you're not going to, if you plant the seed that you saved from a hybrid, you're actually going to get a really diverse mix of things reflecting the parents of that hybrid. So hybrids can be, in fact, a good starting point for a breeding project, but you're not going to be using it in the same way as an open pollinated variety where you might be able to save the seed, replant it, and continue to make selections. So that said, that doesn't mean that hybrids aren't bred for specific regions. When a breeding program develops a hybrid, they can develop a hybrid based on the environmental conditions of a specific region or a specific type of agriculture. It's just a different process of selecting the parents to cross for that hybrid. Hopefully that answers the question.
If I could just jump into, just in case Brian's question was referring to the squash crosses, which are crosses between two different hybrids, that's just a way to generate a very diverse population to make selections out of. So similar to what Alex was saying, but you won't actually have, you'll just have a very mixed population. Basically, just the hybrids are the original source of the genetics for the population.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the end goal of the squash breeding program in CANOVI would be to develop an open pollinated variety.
Yes, yes, these F1s are just creating the original diverse cross to lead to an open pollinated variety.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like Brian has a follow-up. I'm wondering how F1s would be beneficial to a person's region for climatizing that variety.
I'm not quite sure about acclimatizing. I think F1s can be beneficial in the sense that any trait that they have would be an adaptation to whatever region you have. So if you're in a region that experiences a lot of drought, there could be a hybrid that is developed for drought tolerance. So even if it's not specifically developed for your region, it might provide an advantage in your region. So that's one example. I'm not quite sure if that gets at your question.
And I might just add also that because of that reason, most of the varieties in our trials are open pollinated varieties because they do give that potential to work on the seed and to adapt them. But in the cases, like Alex was saying, like in some specific cases where people are looking for a specific trait, sometimes there's been a hybrid we've included just because it seems like it might be interesting to the growers to try it.
Yeah, I think with carrots, a lot of the feedback we've gotten is that the hybrid carrot varieties provide a lot of the uniformity and like in shape and size and uniformity in germination that growers are looking for compared to the open pollinated varieties that are currently out there. And so if we're going to be breeding better open pollinated varieties, we certainly want to be able to compare them to the hybrid varieties that are standard in the market right now.
Yeah, and a quick comment from Tiffany, which maybe is just a follow-up on some of that, looking at drought and disease resistance and earlier fruiting for shorter seasons. I know Tiffany's in northern BC, so it's a very short season relative to other areas. And I know some of the peppers we have in the trials this year as well are more idealized for a shorter season, so that might be good starting material there.
I wish for some reason I can't see the chat window. I can't get it to come up. Oh, here we go.
Got it? Okay, good, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so we are at 11:15, so I think this is to allow folks to get on with their days and get into the fields. I think we can wrap things up here. But yeah, thanks to everybody for their questions, for their participation. I'm really excited to see a really great representation across the country. And thanks to Rachel for joining us in Seattle. Your soccer team is up here in Vancouver on the weekend playing our Whitecaps, so a little bit of a rivalry there. And yeah, we'll be following up with folks with more details about trials and breeding for this year. And as Alex has shared there's contact information on the screen for coordinators, and you can check the bcctrials.ca website for crop instructions for this year. And of course, keep an eye on social media from all these projects just to keep people informed in real time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Chris.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.